Sometimes when we think about generational differences, and this panel disagrees, is that a thing or is that not a thing? We might think about TikTok or fax machines. Why benefits people? Why do we still use fax machines? Somebody explain that to me. Um, so this conversation is going to be about what happens when those five different groups come together to make decisions about culture, about people, about business strategy, and sometimes how we get it right? How do Are you still unmuted or muted in your Zoom call? Uh, do you not understand the nuances of Slack messaging? Like all of these things that we deal with on a daily basis. And so, what we want to do is have a conversation about three different things, right? So, here's what we want to unpack for you: how these cultures coming together can either make or break, sorry, the generations make or break, culture. If you put a group of traditionalists and boomers and X's and Y's and millennials together, what happens? Does that actually accelerate your growth, or are you working, or is it actively working against your company? How do you develop people that grew up with rotary phones and people that grew up with iPhones? I just saw a meme the other day that said, all the spam messaging you're getting is for all those prank calls that Gen X did. Guilty. And then how do you ditch the cliches of the generations and really think about um, making sure that it's a win for you and not a wedge? And I think often we've seen this as a wedge. So we are going to try and make this as interactive. You guys ask questions. They might answer them, they might not. This is a wily bunch. So with that, Andrew, let me start with you. As you think about high growth organizations, how do you think about building a cohesive culture that encompasses all of the dynamics, the differences, and the benefits of thinking about these five different generations?
Lorna, thank you. Um, let's start with a firm foundation. So, regardless of generation, regardless of stage of life, start with clarity as to what your organization is trying to accomplish, what type of work culture, what type of behaviors you want to reward, recognize, reinforce, get more of. So before you can break it down in any way, and I'd suggest 80+% of organizations don't do this very well, get clear about what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it somewhat universally. And then beyond that, you can start to think about segmenting and subdividing your workforce and providing them support and resources and tools. But start with the foundation.
I love that. I think, one of the things that we talked about in my consulting practice for the last few years is clarity and connection is your roadmap to high performance. And we never talked about generational differences. So I love that. So, Lucia, let me throw then the follow up question to you. How do you preserve that culture, knowing that sometimes people do want different things that are rooted on how and when they grew up?
For sure. So, one, I want to follow up on your comment, Andrew. You talked about the foundation. I don't know if this is controversial or not, but my belief is that the foundation of any people function has to be the core experience, the core operating system, efficiency. And if you don't have efficiency and high quality delivery, you don't have time to communicate about culture or do anything else because you're chasing down all of the data errors, all of the people who are missing payroll. So, for me, the very first thing, so with Verta, I've been with Verta from 100 to 1,000. The very first thing is operational efficiency. My team is always thinking through how we can make every step in the employee experience easier, faster, more lightweight. That to me is like the core. And then after that, what I think about is our leaders. Are our leaders able to talk to people from all walks of life, all backgrounds? Are they able to convey that unified message, as you stated? And for that reason, we produced leadership programs for kind of every stage of management. So we have a boot camp for folks when they come in, when they're a new manager. We have something called emerging leaders, where you're learning to be a leader, you're kind of middle level. And we have something called lead, where you are nearing not the end of your career, but you were you were an experienced leader. And each of these programs helps one think through how to communicate to the differing audiences that you are leading. And so that's probably the second step. And the third step, I think about surface area and depth. And with regards to surface area, what I'm talking about is when you look at the entirety of the employee life cycle, how do you ensure that at each of those important touch points, your culture is being reinforced, your culture is being clarified in a way that is meaningful and that it's part of a story? So that's the surface area. And then depth is that story. Like, is that story relatable? Does it have meaning? Can you convey it and feel something? Those are the three kind of pillars of my thinking about maintaining culture.
Have you found and I love the structure of your program. Have you found that it it crosses the generations regardless and that you have a high level of success with the programs?
Yes. So, one of the things that makes these programs work so well is that they tend to be multimodal and multi channel. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're delivering something that is live. So, we're starting moving to Google Meet. You're having a live communication. So, there's video, there's also chat going on, there's also AI recording the conversation and providing a summary at the end of the meeting. So, regardless of what way you want to absorb this information, all of those ways are available to you. Um, and we found that that's been really, really effective when it comes to L&D, and just operating as a business to have all of those options at the fingertips of teammates at all times.
Super interesting. Thank you for that, Lucia. Simona, let's talk a little bit about some research and what you know. We have a lot of operators here, but also two very smart PhDs right in between us. So, what are we dealing with really? Like, are we talking about power struggles? Are we talking about um, bias? Are we talking about identity shift? Like, what does the research tell us about this topic?
I'm probably one of the more controversial ones on this stage. I think there's a question on our generation's a real thing because you look at age groups, which I think all of us, if we look at our workforce data, we can cut our workforce data by age groups. And if you look at engagement data, that doesn't always look like age groups that feel the same way, right? I can't see out there because we're really bright, but I imagine for many of you, you're looking at the data that you have as a broad scale organizational data set. And if you actually cut it by generations, they're all going to kind of look the same. So there's a question on, is there truly a difference? And the difference that we see in the data is usually something around maturity and experience. And so people who are newer to the workforce, just like we all were at some point, have less experience than the people who've been around for a while. And that's fair. At the same time, the context in which people come into being plays a role in how they see the world, right? So if you came into the workforce in 2008, 2009, you understood the world of work as being in a recession. So you were resource constrained. You're sitting there trying to figure out budgets. If you came in 2015, you're like, everything is amazing, right? Let's spend money. Let's do all the things. And now you're like, wait a second, what, like there's a lot of uncertainty. Is it amazing? Is it not? So that experience is for sure shaping how people lead and develop and live. And in the data, we're seeing some interesting stuff. If you actually break down, we have a report that we produce at our firm. Most people are really upset with their leaders across the board. So, our most recent data on the US workforce, where we're pulsing thousands of people every single day, 52% of people in the US workforce admire the leaders they work for. So, if you take two people, one of you are pretty upset, right? That's across the board. The people who are actually the most upset about it are those who are 18 to 24 and the ones who are 55 plus. So, I don't know if that's a generational difference. I think that's a leadership problem, right? The other thing we see is 18 to 24-year-olds are really positive about the impact that businesses can have in society. They're super optimistic, but they're also pretty upset with how things are going, right? So we have this hopeful, optimistic workforce that's kind of coming up and saying like, gosh, how are we going to make this thing happen? And then you've got folks who are 45 to 55 who are like, I'm sitting in the middle of this sandwich of people who don't quite get it and the people who are expecting us to get it faster. And they're pretty upset. So we see them being the most disengaged in our data. So would I say you can cut that by generation? No, I don't think so. But it's something that warrants looking at, right? So your newer workforce, those who are coming in, are having a very different experience and set of expectations that we as organizations need to address. Um, and I don't know if it's a power struggle. I mean, we were just talking, Andrew and I, about how, yes, generations are a thing, but also like how you were raised. Did you have a lot of siblings? Did you not have a lot of siblings? Did you grow up in a big family or a little family? Do you like your mom? Do you like your dad? Like those are all parts of what makes you who you are. And then the generational piece, I mean, the description I always give when I work with CEOs and investors is, when you were looking for information as a kid, like, I don't know if anybody remembers the Dewey Decimal System and card catalogs, but like you would go to the library and you'd like pull out the long drawer and you're looking for the card and you're finding your book. And my kid, who is 8 and 11 of two, was talking to the air and like the air answers. They're like, hey, Google, like, what's the best blah, blah, blah. And they're like, this is what it is. You're like, okay, I didn't get to talk into the air. So he's going to see the world differently. And that's the workforce we have, right? We have people who talk into the air, and we have people who had the Dewey Decimal System, and we're in card catalogs. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have.
So, Andrew, let me throw that then to you as a Dewey Decimal System fanatic, who worked for someone that talked to the air. Um, there was an imbalance there for sure. How would in your practice as you've coached and worked with executives, how do you see those dynamics work out, and what counsel do you give people when there are those generational differences that really do impact the relationship?
I'll come back to the foundation. All right. So, as an operator, and I teach in a couple of different contexts, but I'm an operator at heart, and I think most of you all are as well. So, very practically, and we're talking startup environment, private equity backed environment, not enterprise organizations with tens of thousands of employees and millions of dollars of budget available to do nice to have things. Right. So, as an operator, where will you put your time and your effort? It will need to be in the foundations, into the basics. And so, before you ever get to the segmentation, it's interesting that we're up here talking about generations, and I'm kind of largely saying build the foundations, and all the other things can stack on it later, often later. If your company is fortunate enough and is invested enough in the foundations, in the basics, you can eventually get to the size and scale and resource level where you can start to differentiate and segment and provide more products and services to your employees. Um, but so many organizations are ineffective at those basics. And so I would start with clarity around your mission, clarity around your goals, clarity around how decisions are made in your organization, behaviors, values. And then you can start to move probably much later into perks and programs and benefits. And those are good and those are important, but attend to the basics first. And boy, I can't reinforce that enough, especially for those of you that are at startups that are still burning cash or private equity backed organizations that have a clock ticking until the next exit. If you're fortunate enough to be at an enterprise organization that has the resources, that's trying to appeal to a much, much broader global workforce, wonderful. But those are different scenarios. And so, generally, I would strongly encourage the audience focus on the basics, be brilliant at the basics before you start to move on.
I love that, and I think it hits a little bit on this question that one of you guys out here have asked, which is, have you found that older generations act as obstacles to technology and efficiency? And the way that I would answer that question is exactly as Andrew just did, which is if your company, meaning every single person, understands what you need to do, that should not be the case. And I have, uh, and listen, I've spent the last 10 years working at high growth VC backed organizations and have very specifically gone out to hire older, wiser, experienced employees, especially in things like SEC and compliance and all of the things where you want a little bit more experience and frankly wisdom. Um, and I'm going to throw this question to all of you because I've done this and it worked well. But I'd love your thoughts on reverse mentoring programs. And have you seen those work? Have you not seen them work? For any of you who have not seen the movie The Intern, I urge you, person who asked that question, go watch that movie. So, Lucia.
Yeah, so we don't have something that's as formal as reverse mentoring, but I do something with my organization where every week I have 3-on-1s. So I will meet with 3 teammates from any part of the organization. They're generally all more junior than I am. and just talk to them about their work, like what's going on day to day, what are the biggest challenges that they're facing, what are the new technologies that they're using. And then I keep notes on those meetings throughout the year and talk to my team and the other members of the leadership team about how we can integrate their insights and their thinking into the next thing that we're building and into our strategy. And I encourage all the other execs that we have at Verta to do the same. And we've seen a lot of learnings come out of those 3-on-1s, both in the technical learnings of new tools, new approaches, but also in having a deeper understanding of the team that we are supporting. What do these people care about? What do they want? Are they going to see us as someone who is off in the ether, a floating head, or someone that they know, because they've talked to you in a group setting? So that's one of the things that we do.
I've certainly seen reverse mentoring work as a program, but I think it's more about the one-to-one, right? The programs are great, but it really comes down to someone saying, like, how do you see the world? How do I see the world? And I'll give myself as an example. I have somebody who's on our team who's 22, and she's like, let's use AI. And I'm like, I don't know. And now I know I need to use AI. It's everywhere. It's like the word the around here. But it's this feeling that's like, that feels scary. And for her, it's not scary. It's scary not to use it. And so the experience of going through that with someone who's sort of hand holding is helpful to me. Now, that said, I'm open to it, right? So this idea of will older people, me being, I guess, one of the older ones now, feel like I'm going to be an obstacle? I will be if it's scary, but everyone will be an obstacle if something is scary. So if reverse mentoring makes it less scary, like all day long, we should be doing it. I also feel like one of the challenges that we face right now is the skill development isn't consistent across the board, right? What people come out of college learning is different than what we're teaching in the workforce. And there's so many great vendors out there that I notice are doing a lot of work around skill development. And that's where I think people need to invest across the board, right? And I would say the last thing that's coming to my mind as I'm thinking about how I've seen organizations do this, going back to what Andrew said, which is lean on culture and values. We have a great client who is doing that work and spending the time to say, this is who we are. This is who we are. And when you define that, the whole workforce can be like, okay, that's who we are. You just clarified it for me. And then you can have real conversations of how do we become that together, which some junior people will say, like, we should use AI. And maybe some senior people will say, actually, no, we need to do the hard work. And both are true if it's values aligned, right? My feeling around, and a couple folks I think in the audience have talked about this, I call it the think sandwich. I think when you reverse mentor, the people who've been around for a while and haven't used technology will probably spend more time thinking through things. And the people who are coming into the workforce earlier are doing. And both are right. And so, like, I've advised a couple of firms around how do I bring AI without losing the value of who we are? And I'm like, you got to think first, then use AI, then think again. And if you can create that think sandwich, you're inclusive of everybody. The wisdom comes from the thinking. The using AI and technology comes from this new sort of generation that's really excited about it. And then you're thinking again together to make it real for yourself. That's the takeaway I have.
So I love that you said that. There's a question here. How do you give the right tools to leaders who are younger than those they are leading? And what I'm hearing you say is that there are two things there. One is for those who probably are a little afraid of AI, and this is a stereotype, but let's just say older, like you should be doubling down on change management. And that's my follow-up question to all of you. Change management to help people get comfortable with next generation technology, whether it's AI or something else, because something else is coming really fast behind generative AI. And the other is for this specific question, you still have to invest in leadership development for everybody, right? The average is you've been a manager for 10 years before you sit down to your first manager 101. That's insane, right? So how do you actually think about the different use cases there and the different sets of constituencies that you have in your organization and give them the development and the training that they need?
I can speak to that as well, in that throughout my career, I have always managed people who are older than me. My team currently spans between the ages of 26 and 64, and everyone who reports to me is older than me, many of them significantly older than me. I don't actually think about tools when I think about the management relationship. I think about deeply understanding what the people who report to me care about, what they value, and trying to communicate with them along those lines. And when I think about leadership development, that is front of mind for me as well. It's really about a connection between two people or a group of people more so than it's about any particular technology. And so I focus on helping leaders understand how to recognize what the people they lead care about and value and how to communicate with them along those lines, because that's essentially what we're doing, as managers and leaders, independent of whether it's with AI or with whatever new technology arises. It's always going to be that. It's always going to be, how do you motivate and engage folks to see your vision and to act upon that vision? And to me, that's the same thing today as it was 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Andrew, I think you and I are in our same boat together, and with a little bit more wake behind us. So, what have you experienced? Fine, you can go to my hairdresser. What have you seen in terms of how you think about whether it's development tools, technology, or otherwise, as well as change and how you incorporate change into an organization?
Um, I like to be controversial as well, Simona. Um, don't talk to me about reverse mentoring. Don't talk to me about leadership development. Don't talk to me about HR programs and solutions. Talk to me about your business needs. If we come with the HR solutions first, our solution looking for a problem, we probably won't find the outcome. We because we're not starting with an outcome in mind. Like, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to increase revenue? Are we trying to increase ramp up time of our sales force? Are we trying to increase a percentage of our sales force that hits their quota? Are we trying to expand the usage of a new product that's entering the market? What's the baseline, and what are we moving towards? But if we start with the solution in mind and we try to jam that solution into whatever our organization is experiencing, then we're out on HR Island. We're like Herbie the dentist with the Land of Lost Toys, with out on our own, and that's where we don't get budget. That's where we don't get influence. That's where we don't get respect, and that's where our programs end up getting, they get blown away whenever there's a time of stress and pressure. So, what we have an opportunity to do collectively in the HR function is to start with that firm foundation of what is our organization trying to accomplish. Be really clear before we come with a generational training program that we have that we are well aware that there's some sort of generational problem or issue that we're trying to solve for, and understand what that metric is, where it's at today, and where we want it to be, and put it through the filter of, is this one of the one, two, or three most important things that the organization and our function should be working on?
I talk a lot about having high performing, high humanity organizations. And I think a lot of people feel like it's a trade off, right? So, to Andrew's point, if you're not high performing, you can have people feeling good all day long, but there's nowhere to feel good because the business will not be there. But if you're overly focused on performance and people are feeling burned out, not seen, valued, respected, you can't run a business without people. I've never found one. If you can find one, let me know. So, if you can hold those two together, I think there is a universal truth, which is people are at the center of it, and we're the ones who enable that or disempower. And so, my sense is if we can get to that human truth and help people kind of understand that they're here for a reason, there's a context that they exist in, but then make them feel seen, heard. I've worked with people who are not traditionalists, but quite late in their careers, or investors or board members or CEOs of public companies. They want to be seen, heard, valued, respected, and accepted just as much as the 18-year-old who's entering college. It's the same human truth. And so I think if we can make sure people understand you're here for a reason, there's a business purpose for you, and also you are here for a reason because you have something to contribute, you get the radical high performance and the radical high humanity. I think that's where companies get lost. They feel like they have to pick. And most people don't want to pick either. They want to be part of a winning team and they want to be treated well. And those aren't crazy things, I don't think. Are they? I don't think they're crazy. No, I'm seeing a lot of nods. No, it's not crazy. So I think that's what we aim for.
Lucia, anything to add?
I don't know. I mean, I would say I agree with what both of you have shared. I don't know that I have something distinct.
How about If if we leave here today with anything, and I've heard a few nuggets from each of you, what do you want the audience to leave with and say, I got to go do this because Lucia told me to do it and I heard it on this panel?
Okay. I mean, I'd say make sure you really understand the people who you are responsible for. Like that's the thing I spend a lot of time thinking about is when I look across Verta of our 1,000 teammates, do I understand them? Do I know what they care about? Have I looked at data, not only data that reflects what they're saying, but also what they're doing, to understand what they care about, what they need, and then to build the product of the people function to reflect those needs and to be tailored to those needs. And I think when you have that orientation, all of these potential challenges of generation are addressed because you're building for purpose and you have that clarity in the design of whatever it is that you're delivering. So I would say that.
Simona,
High performance, high humanity. It's not a trade off.
high performance, high humanity.
Clarity. Organizational clarity can be a unifying force across generations, across demographics, across functions, across geographies. Organizational clarity can be that firm foundation by which to launch your company off of.
Simple metrics, clear communications, one purpose. Beautiful. I love it. Thank you guys for being here with us. Super, super happy. I hope you loved and enjoyed Transform. Please take this panel with you. Listen, we have a lot of tension in the workplace, and hopefully you can take what we shared and make it into momentum. We're super happy to be here. Thank you all for being with us. Let's get rid of this generational friction and make it some generational fuel. And now you're free for vodka martinis.